They called it Suicide Point, because 2 days earlier, Japanese bombers had turned that beach into hell. Fuel dumps exploded, ammunition cooked off for hours, the field hospital burned. Wounded men died before anyone could reach them. 59 Americans were killed, 77 more were wounded. And the Marines on Rendova Island learned a brutal truth. Their anti-aircraft guns were powerful. Without radar, they were almost blind. Then, on the morning of July 4th, 1943, the Japanese came back. 16 Mitsubishi Betty bombers appeared over the Solomon Islands. They were heading straight for the same beach, straight for the supply dumps, straight for the Marines who had survived the last attack. But this time, something was different. This time, the radar was working. This time, the 90mm guns were ready. And this time, a 22-year-old Marine named Evan Evans was not going to watch Japanese bombers fly away again. He was sitting behind a 9-ton anti-aircraft gun, a weapon that could throw a 24-pound shell higher than most aircraft could fly. Around him, the jungle was wet. The beach was still scarred. The men still remembered the screams from 2 days before. And above them, 16 Japanese bombers were coming in to finish the job. 27 minutes later, 12 of those bombers would be gone, blown out of the sky, burning in the ocean, crashing into jungle, dumping their bombs early and running for their lives. Suicide Point was about to become a graveyard, not for the Marines. For the Japanese aircrews who thought Rendova was still an easy target. This is the story of Evan Evans and the 9th Defense Battalion, the Marine gun crew that turned radar, math, steel, and pure rage into one of the deadliest anti-aircraft ambushes of the Pacific War. The day 12 Japanese bombers came for Rendova, and only 4 escaped. Rendova Island was never supposed to become famous. It was muddy, hot, wet, covered in jungle, and strategically important only because of what it could do to the islands around it. Across Blanche Channel sat New Georgia. On New Georgia was Munda Airfield, and Munda mattered. As long as the Japanese held it, they could threaten Allied movement through the Central Solomons. So the Americans needed Rendova. They needed artillery on the island. They needed supply dumps. They needed a beachhead. And they needed anti-aircraft guns to keep Japanese bombers away long enough for the whole operation to work. That was why the 9th Defense Battalion came ashore. They brought 90mm anti-aircraft guns, big guns, heavy guns. Weapons designed to create a wall of flak above the island. On paper, it looked strong. 12 90mm guns, fire control systems, radar, trained Marine crews. A defensive umbrella no bomber should want to fly through. But war does not care about what looks good on paper. On July 2nd, the Japanese struck hard. Radar had been knocked out. Warning time was almost non-existent. Bombers came in low over the water. They hit fuel first, then ammunition, then medical areas. The beach became fire and smoke. Marines ran through flames trying to save wounded men. Explosions threw debris high into the air. Trucks melted. Ammunition kept exploding for hours. The gunners fired. Evans and his crew fired. But the bombers were too fast. The tracking was too slow. Without radar, the 90mm guns could not do what they were built to do. The Japanese bombers came in, dropped their loads, and left behind a burning beach. That is why the Marines called it Suicide Point, because everyone on Rendova knew the Japanese would come back. And if the guns failed again, the island might not survive another strike. Even Evans was not a famous ace. He was not flying a fighter. He was not sitting in the cockpit of some legendary aircraft. He was a Marine behind an anti-aircraft gun. That kind of hero rarely gets remembered. Fighter pilots become legends. Bomber crews get movies. Infantry charges get paintings. But anti-aircraft gunners stand in one place and wait for death to come from the sky. They do not chase the enemy. The enemy comes to them. They have seconds to aim, seconds to calculate, seconds to fire, and if they are wrong, the bombs land on their friends. Evans knew that better than anyone after July 2nd. He had seen what happened when the guns missed. He had watched Japanese bombers fly through the fire and hit the island. He had watched men die. So when the rain came on July 3rd, it gave the battalion a gift. The Japanese did not fly in heavy weather. That meant time, not much, but enough. Mechanics worked through the rain. Radar crews repaired what they could. Fire control teams checked their systems. Gun crews cleaned weapons, stacked ammunition, and rehearsed drills. The SCR-268 radar sets were not perfect, but by the morning of July 4th they were working, not flawlessly, not beautifully, but well enough to see what was coming, and that was everything. Because a 90mm gun without radar was a brute, a 90mm gun with radar became a trap. At 8:45 in the morning, radar picked up the incoming formation. Japanese aircraft, inbound from Rabaul, long range, high altitude, moving down the slot toward Rendova. The warning spread fast, the sirens began. Every Marine on the island knew that sound. Men ran for foxholes, medics grabbed supplies. Seabees stopped unloading ships and dove for cover. The beach emptied, except for the gun crews. They stayed. Evans and his crew moved into their rhythm, Lord, rammer, fuse setter, gunner. Every man had a job, every second mattered. A 90mm shell did not just need to be fired at the bomber. It had to explode where the bomber would be, not where it was, not where it had been, where it would be seconds later. That was the hard part. The Japanese Betty bomber could move fast enough to cross miles in under a minute. If the timing was wrong by even a little, the shell would burst too high, too low, too far ahead, or too far behind. A miss in anti-aircraft warfare was not almost good enough, it was nothing. Evans checked the gun, the ammunition was ready. High explosive shells, timed fuses, the radar fed data. The fire control director calculated angles, the crews waited. And, out over the water, 16 Japanese bombers kept coming. They had escorts, they had discipline. They had bomb loads meant for the beach, and they had reason to believe Rendova's guns could not stop them. That belief was about to die. The order came fire. All across Rendova, the 90mm guns opened up. The sound was enormous. Each gun threw a shell into the sky with enough force to shake dust from sandbags. The air filled with blasts. The crews moved like machines. Ram, set, fire. Ram, set, fire. There was no time for fear. No time to think about the men killed 2 days earlier. No time to think about the bombs coming toward them. Only the next shell, the next fuse setting, the next firing solution. At first, the bursts were off. Black puffs appeared near the Japanese formation, but not close enough. The bombers adjusted slightly and kept coming. That was the terrifying part. Japanese crews were disciplined. They did not break just because flak appeared. They had flown through American anti-aircraft fire before. Most of it had missed. They expected more of the same. Then Battery C's gun director locked onto the lead bomber. The radar return was clean. The computer adjusted, elevation shifted, azimuth corrected. Evans fired. The shell screamed upward. It climbed through thousands of feet of humid air. The fuse counted down, then it exploded ahead of the lead Betty. The bomber flew into the blast. Shrapnel ripped through the engine. Smoke poured from the aircraft. Fire spread across the wing. For a moment, the pilot tried to hold formation. Then the bomber dropped away. The wing failed. The aircraft fell into the water. One down. And the Japanese were still coming. The remaining bombers tightened their formation. That might have been discipline. It might have been fear. Either way, it made them targets. The Marine guns kept firing. The sky ahead of the formation became a wall of black bursts. The Japanese bombers flew straight into it. Then more aircraft started smoking. One lost part of its tail. Another began losing power from both engines. A third dropped out of formation and never recovered. The attack run began to fall apart. The Betty bombers were supposed to fly over Rendova and drop their bombs on the island. Instead, the crews released early. Bombs fell into empty ocean. Huge columns of water rose far from shore. Not one hit the beach. Not one hit the supply dumps. Not one hit the Marines. And Evans kept firing. The Japanese were turning away now, but they were still in range. And the 9th Defense Battalion was not finished. A bomber climbing away became predictable. A bomber trying to escape in a straight line became a target. A bomber losing formation became vulnerable. The radar tracked, the director calculated, the gun crews fired. More shells climbed, more black bursts opened in the sky. Another Betty took a near burst underneath the fuselage. The shock wave slammed into it. The nose pitched down. The pilot could not recover. The bomber fell. 4 down. The raid was no longer an attack. It was a retreat. Then the real slaughter began. The Japanese formation broke apart. Some aircraft turned west. Some turned north. Some tried to climb. Some tried to run low. But the radar could still find them. and the 90mm guns could still reach them. Evan's gun barrel was heating fast. The crew had been firing at a punishing rate. The metal shimmered, heat rose from the barrel. A gun pushed too hard can lose accuracies, a barrel can warp, a weapon can fail at the worst possible moment. But the Japanese were still in the air, so the Marines kept loading. A Betty tried to climb towards safety. Evans fired. One shell missed high. The next burst behind the tail. Shrapnel cut control surfaces. The bomber went into a spin and disappeared into the jungle. 5 down. 2 more bombers ran northwest. Battery C took one. Another battery took the second. Both were hit. One lost an engine and rolled into the sea. The other lost its tail and dove uncontrollably. 7 down. The sky was now full of smoke, fire, falling debris, and broken formation lines. The Japanese had sent bombers to destroy the island. Instead, the island was destroying them. Another aircraft tried to flee west over open ocean. Evans fired again. The burst ripped into the fuselage. The bomber still had ordnance aboard. The aircraft exploded violently, scattering debris across the water. 8 down. Other batteries were scoring now too. More Japanese aircraft were hit. One fell burning. Another broke apart. Another dropped into the ocean trailing smoke. The numbers were becoming unbelievable. This was not just defense. This was an execution. A coordinated radar-directed anti-aircraft kill zone, and the Betty crews had flown directly into it. By 9:30, the attack was broken. Only a few bombers were still flying. They were running, climbing, scattered. Damaged, trying to put distance between themselves and Rendova. The Zero escort had already disappeared. The bombers that remained were on their own. Evans tracked one retreating aircraft at long range, almost too far. The bomber was climbing, trying to escape the flak zone. Evans fired anyway. The shell burst too far away to kill. But close enough to make the message clear. Rendova was not helpless anymore. The ceasefire order came at 9:32. For the first time in nearly half an hour, the guns fell silent. The quiet felt strange. Painful. Evans stepped back from the gun. His hands were shaking, not because he had been afraid, because his body had been running on pure adrenaline. His ears rang, his muscles burned, the crew collapsed against sandbags. They had loaded, rammed, fused, and fired until movement became automatic. The gun log told the story. Battery C had fired dozens of rounds. Across Rendova, the 90mm guns had fired 88 shells against 16 bombers. And when the radar operators confirmed the count, the results stunned everyone. 12 Japanese bombers destroyed. 4 escaped, some of those were damaged. Not one bomb had hit the island. 2 days earlier, Suicide Point had burned. Now it had killed the force sent to burn it again. The numbers were almost impossible. 12 bombers down in 27 minutes. A destruction rate that no one expected. Most anti-aircraft units were happy with a small percentage of hits. The 9th Defense Battalion had done something extraordinary. But the kill count was only part of the story. Those bombers had carried thousands of pounds of explosives. Every bomb was meant for Marines. Every aircraft was a threat to fuel, ammunition, hospitals, artillery, and supply lines. If the raid had succeeded, Rendova could have burned again. The beachhead could have been disrupted. The artillery supporting New Georgia could have been silenced. The campaign could have slowed. Instead, the Japanese dumped their bombs into the ocean and ran. That is what Evans and the gunners had really done. They did not just shoot down aircraft. They protected the island's ability to fight. After the battle, Marines emerged from foxholes. Seabees went back to unloading supplies. Work parties began recovering aircraft debris from the water. Pieces of Japanese bombers washed ashore, engine cowling, wing sections. A tail with the red circle still visible. The beach returned to work. But everyone knew something had changed. Rendova was not just a target anymore. It was defended, and defended well. Japanese crews would remember what happened there, if they survived long enough to report it. The news moved up the chain of command fast. A Marine Defense Battalion had just destroyed most of a Japanese bomber formation with radar-directed fire. Command wanted details, radar settings, fire control procedures, gun director data, fuse timing, communication methods. Every lesson mattered, because if Rendova could do this, other American positions could do it too. That was why the battle mattered beyond one island. The Pacific War was a war of bases. airfields, beachheads, supply dumps, angages. Every captured island had to be protected from Japanese air attack. If radar and heavy anti-aircraft guns could work together this effectively, then American forces could make daylight bombing raids far more costly for Japan. The Japanese learned too. After July 4th, their attacks changed: fewer bombers, higher altitudes, night raids, less confidence, more caution. The old approach was no longer safe. Daylight attacks against radar-directed 90mm guns could be suicide, and Japan could not afford to lose experienced bomber crews that fast. Rendova's guns had changed the calculation. By forcing Japanese aircraft away from effective daylight attacks, the Marines helped secure the island. With Rendova safer, American artillery could continue firing across the channel. The long guns pounded Japanese positions on New Georgia. That helped the Allied advance toward Munda airfield, and once Munda fell, the whole campaign shifted. A single anti-aircraft battle did not win the Solomons, but it helped keep the machine moving. And in war, keeping the machine moving can decide everything. For Evan Evans, the war did not end at Rendova. The 9th Defense Battalion continued serving in the Pacific. They moved to New Georgia, then later to Guam. They defended airfields, harbors, and beachheads. They fired at Japanese aircraft. They used 90mm guns not only against planes, but sometimes against ground targets. Those big shells could smash bunkers and cliff positions when fired directly. The battalion kept fighting. Disease became an enemy too. Dengue fever, heat, exhaustion, rot. Mud, mosquitoes. The Pacific did not need bullets to hurt men. Evans eventually became a sergeant. He survived the war. He returned home. Like many veterans, he did not talk much about what had happened. How do you explain a day like July 4th, 1943? How do you explain the sound of a 90mm gun firing again and again? The sight of bombers falling. The knowledge that every aircraft destroyed meant enemy crews dying in fire, water, or jungle. The pride and the weight came together, because war is never clean. Saving your own men often means killing someone else's. Evans carried Rendova with him. For decades, he thought the memory belonged only to the men who had been there. Then, 50 years later, a photograph surfaced. 3 Marines standing beside a 90mm gun: Evans, Roy Boone, John Gamborowski, young men beside the weapon that had made history. The photograph proved that the day had not vanished. The record had survived. The men had not been forgotten completely. That is why stories like this matter. Because history often remembers the pilots, the generals, the ships, the invasions, but sometimes the turning point is a gun crew on a muddy island, a radar operator staring at a screen, a fuse setter dialing in seconds, a loader lifting shell after shell until his arms burn, a young Marine who does not know whether the next bomb will land on him. Evan Evans did not fight in the glamorous part of the war. He did not fly into the sky. He fired into it. He stood on the ground while the enemy came down from above. And when the moment came, he and the 9th Defense Battalion turned precision into survival. 12 bombers, 27 minutes, 88 shells, Zello bombs on the island. Those numbers are more than statistics. They are the difference between a beach burning again on a beach staying alive. They are the difference between helpless men in foxholes and Marines realizing the sky above them could be defended. They are the reason Suicide Point stopped being a name of terror and became a warning to the enemy. If Evan Evans and the Marines of the 9th Defense Battalion deserve to be remembered, hit the like button, Skuskirv, for more forgotten World War II stories. Because some heroes do not wear wings. Some stand behind a gun on a burning island. Wait for the enemy to come back. I turn the sky itself into a graveyard.